The Lima Class 09 diesel shunter is a fairly basic model, but I don't think it looks too bad. The most obvious toy-like faults are the shiny cranks and coupling rods, but otherwise its appearance is okay. It is low geared and can be run slowly at appropriate shunter speeds. However, it picks up current from only 4 wheels, which causes problems on insel frog points. I therefore thought I would see if I could add extra pickups to help slow running. The first challenge was how to remove the body. There are 2 lugs on the rear of the chassis which are a push fit into the rear buffer beam. However, the front of the body needs to be released first, and I couldn't see how it was fixed on. Often Lima bodies are just a clip fit onto the chassis, but it soon became obvious that this one wasn't. Eventually I realised that I had to remove the screw at the front of the chassis there, and then all I had to do was to pull the body forward and it lifted off. Easy when you know how, eh? The model as purchased has 2 brass wipers which rub lightly on the backs of the front and rear driving wheels on the left hand side. They look quite fragile and flimsy, so care should be taken when working on the chassis. On my model, the front one only just covers the back of the driving wheel and looks like it might spring out of place at any moment. I originally intended only to add a pickup to the centre wheel, but thought that whilst I was at it I might as well add an extra one to the front wheel as well. A sort of belt and braces approach. There is room between the screws, there and there, to glue in a small piece of phosphor bronze strip. A piece of 1/2 mm wire bent to shape so that it rubbed lightly on the backs of both wheels was soldered to the phosphor bronze strip. The odd shape of the latter was to allow room to solder a wire there which takes the pickup current to the motor. A small hole was drilled in the chassis for the wire to be pushed through. The other end was soldered to the existing pickup wire on this side of the chassis. All the wheels on this model are gear driven, which means there are a lot of gears in a relatively small space. The large moulded gears are an integral part of the driving wheels, and there is no room for pickup wipers on the backs of these wheels. To overcome this problem, Lima have installed pickup strips there and there, which bear on the tops of the front and rear driving wheels. The simplest way, it seemed to me, was to cut a small piece of brass strip and simply piggyback it on top of the existing Lima one. The other end bears lightly on the wheel rim of the middle driving wheel. Care must be taken when soldering this strip on, as A, there's not much room, but B, more importantly, there are fixing lugs just there to help hold the original strip in place. We don't want to melt them with a hot soldering iron. To help adhesion, Lima have provided an oddly shaped weight which loosely fits into 2 holes in the chassis. The weight needed a small amount removed from the underside to allow it to fit over my new soldered joint. A simple job with a small file, and the weight now fits perfectly. Once the body is replaced, it is held in place with a piece of foam rubber. I had previously stripped the motor down, cleaned it and oiled all the gear wheels, so now it was time to test everything to see if my new pickups worked. Well, as you can see, the new centre pickups work just fine, both picking up current beautifully. However, initially the wheels knocked once every revolution, and at very slow speeds they stopped altogether. After a lot of looking, prodding, thinking and cursing, I finally found the answer. A small piece of ballast was lodged in one of the large gear wheels on the back of the driving wheel. Once it was removed and I checked all the gears again, the chassis was retested and the loco now works perfectly. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of gears on this model, and the large ones are very close to the track, so can easily pick up unwanted fluff, ballast, etc. If your loco stops for no apparent reason, this could be the reason why. With the chassis separated from the body, it was painted and weathered. First of all, the cranks and coupling rods were painted yellow. The chassis, couplings, buffer beams and wheel spokes were then stippled with a version of my favourite underframe grime. In this case, a mixture of Humbrol enamels numbers 53, 82 and 32 in the approximate ratios of 3 to 2 to 5. The cranks and coupling rods were treated to a thinner wash of this colour, most of which was removed with a cotton bud slightly moistened with thinners. It must be stressed that only a thin wash should be used on the coupling rods, as we don't want them to seize up and become non-working. Frequent testing of the motor ensured that the wheels still turned. Once all was dry, the springs, steps and various other underframe parts were dry brushed in a rusty brown colour and the chassis put to one side. I wanted my Gronk to look work-stained and uncared for, so, as usual, I trawled the internet for suitable photos of the prototype. It soon became obvious that, as well as a general tatty appearance, there were several areas that were more dirty than the rest of the body. The top ledges of what I assume are toolboxes seem to accumulate dirt and dust which doesn't ever seem to clear. The top surfaces of the running boards seem similarly to attract more than their fair share of dirt. The radiator blinds on the front of the body attract dirt, and there's often oil spillage below the oval plate in front of the cab. On top of the bonnet at the front of the loco, there is always a dark exhaust staining, and in addition there's often rust in this area. Finally, the grills on the sides of the body in front of the cab are often dirty as well. All of this was carefully added by a combination of dry brushing and airbrushing. Once I was happy with the effect, the whole model was airbrushed with a light coating of grime to tone everything together. It was only at this point that I realised that the Lima model has no glazing. This, together with the fact that the cab is made of thick plastic, rather spoiled the effect I was after. The solution, however, was simple. Southeastern Finecast make one of their flush glaze kits for the Class 08/09, so I purchased one. The glazing was easy to fit and has, in my opinion, transformed the model. One simple change which would improve the appearance of the loco no end would be to swap the huge couplings for something more aesthetic. As most of my stock has variations of the standard hook and loop coupling, I left them as they were. It is, however, a simple matter to change them if you wish. Similarly, vacuum pipes, hooks and other buffer beam equipment could also be added, but they might get in the way of the Lima hook and loop coupling. The modifications that can be made to this model can go on and on. However, I called a halt at this stage because after all it's still only a basic Lima model. So, was it worth it? A quick comparison of the original model I think shows that the appearance has been transformed. It is now much less toy-like and more like a decent model. I must say, I'm rather pleased with it. Now, some shots of the loco on the layout to see how she looks in her natural habitat. Finally, some video showing how well the loco performs, particularly at low speeds. That's all for now. See you next time.